Hi, I am SB Rawz. I'm a coach and a messy whole human. And this is Kirsten Bunch joining me for another All Up in It conversation, 35-ish minutes of reporting from the complicated, exhilarating midst of learning. Kirsten, thank you for joining me today. I've been so excited, looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, thanks, SB. Me too. Me too. I know we've rescheduled a couple times. I'm so glad we could finally connect.
Yeah, adventures and merging calendars, right? Like that's just a normal
Exactly.
thing.
Exactly.
Well, I'd love to invite you to start us off by just sharing with whoever might be watching how you understand yourself as a human these days.
Yeah. Such a rich question that I spent quite a while thinking about. And so what I came up with is, first there's the labels that I usually use in my professional life, which is I am a professional life and career coach for the LGBTQ plus community. Um, and then I was thinking that here, because I'm talking to you, and also just because of the nature of what this show is about, I wanted to be a little more creative and reflective in my answer. Um, so here are some of the things I'm exploring or understanding myself as a human these days. One, I'm alone after an 18-year relationship ended in a very specific way with a denial of my queer identity.
Mm.
Um, so I'm figuring out at this point in my life, I'm figuring out how I want all my identities to show up and intersect. So identities of being a cisgender, queer, um, woman, um, a daughter, a sister, um, a new community member, lots of different things, because I also recently just moved into a new state and a new community. Um, and then I'm also understanding or discovering about myself, I think what my true inherent worth as a human being is.
Mm.
And I feel like in many ways it's kind of the season of life I'm in, but also just the things that I've gone through in the past year have really brought this home to me. Um, and then I'm realizing too, with all that's, this is a final thing, with all that's going on in the world and, you know, so many big issues that we're facing as a society or as societies, I've come to realize that I am someone who focuses on the individual level, that I'm interested and I'm good at helping people heal and self-actualize so that they can go out and do like the big systems work or the big, fulfill their purpose and dreams. Um, so I'll stop right there.
Oh, I loved all of that. I would have been totally great if you kept going. And part of what I love about what you shared is that you really got into the complexity of being human, right? We're not a thing. We are so many things. And um, yeah, and to bring it back to that, Kimberly Crenshaw's idea of intersectionality, I think is so important and so rich and so honoring of the individuals. That's beautiful.
Mm.
Thank you. Yeah. So you sound like you were all up in all sorts of stuff, and I wonder, I
Should I
wonder,
pull something out of the hat?
yeah, please. I would love that.
Just kidding.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what's
Talk
feeling
about that.
particularly present for you today to share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. I am all up in everything from a lot of new things, from learning how to paint my new house to like we were talking about before, finding a contractor to redo my kitchen, that type of thing. I'm all up in learning what it means to be a Georgian or living in Georgia as opposed to New Jersey, where I came from, in New York State, where I grew up from. First time living in the South, so that's new. Um, but I think, on a professional level, what I'm all up in is learning how to help, well, learning and also helping people through what I call relational trauma.
Mm.
Um, and I just finished a coaching certification course in relational trauma. And what I mean by that is, how do I, as a coach, help people heal from toxic relationships?
Mhm.
And especially relationships that in some way deny a person's full expression of their identity.
Mhm.
Um, so whether, if we look at the LGBTQ plus community, whether you're in a romantic relationship with somebody who's not out at some part in their life, in some part or some part of their life,
Mhm.
and they're hiding you, or they're lying to you, or they're, doing some things that just aren't cool and aren't cool for you in your identity. So how do you heal from that? Or it could be you're, working somewhere that is um, encouraging you to keep your transness a secret for the sake of profit, or for the sake of team dynamics, or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, so I am all about this these days, and am loving digging into this, but also seeing how present this is in our communities, in our workplaces, when people basically do bad things to each other and treat others like dirt.
Mhm.
What happens to us? It's not easy to get over. And what I'm really enjoying is learning how to help people heal from that,
Mm.
and how to help them recover so that they can go on and live really happy and healthy and um, loving lives where they can express their full identity.
Mm. Gosh, in that I hear so much about our inherent interdependence, right? And that when we part of what I feel like I heard you just say is that when we abandon ourselves in some way, when we don't feel like we can or want to live into the fullness of our identity, it can't help but radiate out. And I think that that's what part of what came up for me was that that's part of what I see happening on a social level and in businesses and things like that, that there's this fear of what is bizarrely perceived as new or novel or something like that, right? Like queer identities being perceived as new or novel, or like all these people are trans now. Like it's just a very strange thing to me. This sort of historical hiccup that thinks that this is new, and the lack of richness, right, that we get from being prohibitive in expression in that way. And it's not expression; it's identity. It's being human
Mhm.
in all scenarios. I don't feel like anything that I just said made sense. Did it make any sense to you?
Yeah, well, I think what I took out of that is one, the the time we're in right now. There's not really the fact that there's more of a focus on trans and non-binary doesn't mean that this is new. It doesn't mean that there weren't any trans people before like 2020, right? Like
Right.
that's kind of crazy. And also I think we're really feeling in whether we're questioning it, or we're just angry about it, or we're just accepting of it. What we're seeing is, politicians standing up, people in churches standing up and saying, you as a human, as the way you identify and just the way, who you are, you're wrong. And I- that, whether you, in my experience, whether you are able to just say, that's bullshit, I'm not going
Hmm.
to listen to you, or you're just, you're thinking, well, maybe there's something to this, maybe they're right. Regardless of how you react, it still leaves an impact on you,
Hmm.
and it can make you really question who you are. It can create anxiety, depression, a lot of mental health conditions. um, and when this happens in a place where somebody you loved or trusted or relied on is doing this sort of thing to you, or is creating this sort of environment to you, it can create something in you that is really, really hard to move past without the help of a coach, a therapist, or somebody like that.
Absolutely. So you come back to that interdependence, which I think is so important. Did you start focusing on relational trauma prior to your hard breakup, or was that in the wake of? Is that part of your
It was
healing?
it was a very strange thing. So and I'm still trying to wrap my brain around what happened in the timing of this. So I started this course. It was a 8-month course, really intensive, a lot of work. At the same time, within a week or two, that my relationship imploded and that this happened. And so one of my instructors in the course said, well, I think the universe sent you here, because it wasn't intentional at all. And the reason why I was attracted to the course and had signed up for it months before, was because I work with a lot of people who have had some form of relational trauma in the workplace. Whether they were on a team where they were gaslit, where they were denied working conditions that allowed them to do their job, whether they were fired unjustly. There are a lot of different things. What I found with these people is that they would come to coaching because they were having a really hard time moving past that and getting over that, even after they had left the job and had moved on to like another position that was like people were really supportive and it was great. They still found that they were mistrustful, that they couldn't like let their guard down, that they were still experiencing a lot of anxiety and stress. And so that's what got me interested in the first place. And then it just happened to be that what happened in my relationship was very, very on point with what we were learning, what we do as coaches working in this area. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's pretty funky. Haha,
Bad timing,
universe. I see you.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so, I have, I think all coaches have that experience of like sort of self-coaching along the way of learning. Is that a thing for you? Is that a thing that you were noticing as you were learning this content or this approach?
Yeah, I actually think that coaches do that all the time, and not just within this topic, but in general. I think people become coaches because they're going through a process of self-discovery themselves.
For sure.
And there are people like us who, when we learn, we want to teach. When we learn, we want to share. When we experience, we want somebody else to experience. And that it's interesting if I think about in this case, going through this process, I was really I was almost just like, it was almost in some ways an out of body experience, because on one hand, I was waking up to what had gone on in my relationship that I hadn't seen before or hadn't named before.
Hmm.
At the same time of understanding like how I would use what I was learning to help the clients that I had worked with in the past through, what I was just describing with the workplace trauma,
Hmm.
relational trauma. So it was like, yeah, it was like this really disjointed, like, oh my God, this is totally me. And oh, cool, this is where I can use it. And oh my God, and cool. And oh my God, and cool.
Yeah, yeah. The learn, share, learn cycle I'm very familiar with. The oh my God, cool cycle I love, and I'm gonna borrow that because that's a real thing, isn't
It is a real thing.
it?
It is a real thing. And by the way, I think that this is what makes coaches so powerful, and that in able to change people's lives, because we aren't just like learning something in a book and then being like, oh, go do this.
Hmm.
We're like feeling it so deeply, and then with that experience, we can have a level of empathy that allows magic to happen within a coaching session.
Yeah, yeah. I do sometimes think of myself as a co-learner rather than a coach, or that my coaching style or a coaching style is co-learning, right? Like I'm gonna learn it, I'm gonna share it, I'm gonna learn something about what I've shared based on your response, right? And that we're
Yeah,
gonna ping back and forth in that way and both grow in the process, which is magical to me.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would like all coaches to embrace that form of coaching. because I think
Yeah.
that's where real change happens.
Well, it takes a real groundlessness, right? We have to get over needing to be the person providing value,
Mm.
right? In order to be in that space with someone. And when I hear you describing where you've been in your life lately, I hear a lot of groundlessness, which is it can be a very exciting place. It can be a very uncomfortable place. And I wonder how you've been being with the groundlessness, if that's even a meaningful way to frame it for you.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way. But yeah, it lines up. So it's or maybe a shaky ground.
Mm.
So, and what I've found in the shaky ground is that there's so much freedom, and I love the freedom. And
Mhm.
even as something like I've got my own house now, and I live by myself with my 2 dogs and 2 cats, and I can do whatever the hell I want.
Mhm.
And it's amazing. I even find I was journaling about this the other day. I have these conversations with myself, and I don't know if everybody does this, but I'll be like, oh, should I put a picture there and on the wall, or should I paint it this color? And then my brain will go into, well, what will this person think of this color? And then I'll stop myself and go, it really doesn't matter. How do I feel about this color? So there's great freedom in that. And then it's also
Mhm.
excruciating. Um it's no fun to be groundless around shaky ground. It's really
Mhm.
painful. And um yeah, so both of those things are there, and you can catch me on a day and I might be in one place and then 10 minutes later I'll be in the other place.
Yeah.
And that's what I find with my clients too. Like, you get to change how you're feeling within 5 minutes if you want
Mhm.
to. It's totally okay.
Yeah, it's just very human, right? We have a real richness inside of us when we pay attention.
That's true. And yet we're supposed to have it all figured out,
Right.
right? Especially at my age. You're supposed to have it all figured out. Well, guess what? No. And I hope I never do.
Yeah, how boring would that be? Gosh.
Seriously.
Has there been a part of this time of transition in your life that has included reacquainting yourself with yourself or learning who you are now? Maybe that's exactly what we're just talking about, though.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's all it is. It's
Yeah,
everything. It's
yeah.
everything. And I think there was a point where I realized, because if you had asked me a year ago, hey, do you know who you are? It would have been like, absolutely. Like I so know who I am at this point in my life. Um, and it's like I took the snow globe and shook it up, and now now I'm rediscovering, like, no, really, who am I? What do I like?
Hmm.
What do I what do I enjoy? How do I want to spend my time? Who do I want to be in community with?
Hmm.
What kind of pajamas do I want to wear to bed? Like, it's incredible. It's an incredible process. And wow, I don't really have any answers yet, which, I mean, I have a couple answers, but um there was a point early on in the breakup of my relationship where I had gone up to the Catskills in New York State to just be by myself with my 2 dogs and a kitten. Um, and I was sitting there one night and I was thinking about, okay, like, what do I want to do in the next 3 hours? And I thought, like, I'm a kind of person who has a glass of wine every night. That's the kind of person I am. And I decided not to have the conversation of like, oh, but the calories, oh, I shouldn't be drinking every night. Or, I mean, I'm like a glass, not a bottle. I decided I'm not the person that should have a bottle every night, but I am the person who could have a glass of wine every night. And
Mhm.
that's part of who I am.
Yeah, yeah, right on. I'm curious, as a lifelong Southerner, though, I'm very much an East Coaster because my mother's from Philly, spent a lot of time up there. It really changes the Southern experience when you have when you have roots in a northern city. But what's that piece been like? What's it like being a new Southerner?
Oh God. Um, so I've been here for 6 weeks. Um, you know what? It's really cool. And I didn't think I was going to say that. Um, I I realize how many kind of preconceived notions or biases I had about the South, or about, about the South, because I'm not in the city. I'm like out at the foothills of Georgia. I'm out there. My cows are my neighbors kind of place,
Lucky person.
which is really cool, by the way.
Love living near cows.
Yeah. Not too close, but close enough.
Too close.
Yeah. And it's been really cool. I mean, I just have found people to be really kind and yeah, welcoming, but not overly in your face kind of thing. And I'm really enjoying a slower pace of life. People don't seem to be too concerned if you like are taking a little while in the grocery line, and like coming from New York and New Jersey, like forget it, right? So yes, I mean, so far it's been really interesting. But I would say that I've also had to rethink or re-examine how I show up in community and what community means to me. And one of the things that I've been conscious of, I don't know if worried isn't the word, but of, will I find a queer community in this small town? And how do I intentionally look for that? And the answer has been like surprisingly yes. Like yes, there are a lot of people here that are from the queer community. But I've also said, there's a point where I kind of was saying like I'm gonna have to intentionally get out and meet people. I can't just like sit in my house with my dogs and cats, and like it's great, but it's also not healthy. Like we know studies show that humans really need other human interaction in order to stay healthy. So, in the absence of like the cool cafe where all the gay people hang out or something like that, which you would find in New Jersey or New York, I was just like, well, where can I find community? And I ended up finding a Unitarian Universalist church that I decided I don't normally go to church. Like I grew up in the Episcopal church, but I'm not involved in the church or haven't been. And when I looked up their website, it was like on the top of it was like LGBTQ plus friendly here. And I'm like, okay, let me check this out. And when I went in to the Sunday service, I guess it's a service. I don't know what it is. And I also I have to look up like the idea of church because it doesn't feel like a church to me because it's not focused around Christianity. But anyway, the reverend or minister got up, this lovely woman, and the first words out of her mouth were like, if you're gay, lesbian, trans, you are welcome here. If you are an addict or a recovering or sober, you are welcome here. If you are brown, black, white, you are welcome here. And I was just like, wow, I think I landed somewhere that I might be able to really, really relate to. And it's been a really cool learning experience.
That made me a little teary, a little goosebumpy and teary. That's beautiful.
I have to tell you, I'm going to tell the whole world right now, but I like, you go to a place and it's like, you don't know anybody and you're walking in. I was doing everything I could to not start like just bawling in front of all these people. And it's getting a little better. I've been 3 times now, but every time I'm like almost near tears and just there's something magical happening there. And eventually I'll stop crying every time I walk in.
I love that about UUs. It's like there's so much shrug to the spiritual and religious aspects, like, oh, we don't know, but but there's no shrug to the inclusiveness, right? It's just like, come on in. I think that's beautiful. I think that's a great model.
Yeah, who knew?
Yeah.
Not me.
So as you traverse this time, what are some of the tools that you've been using to support you? When I say tools, I really mean internal resources, external resources. You're describing really beautiful community and real intentionality around that. What kind of tools?
Well, pretty much every tool that we use as coaches, first of all, like acceptance, willing to just be with whatever's coming up in that moment
Mhm.
and not fighting against it. You know, like, am I feeling sadness? Am I feeling anger? Am I feeling, regret? Which regret doesn't come up often, but it's just like, okay, that's what's here right now. It's okay.
Yeah.
And just be with it.
Mhm.
And with that, I think comes spaciousness and silence, and not having to feel like I have to fill every second of every day with something in order to distract me, which absolutely was the case when, in the first several months of this happening to me, or happening in my life, not to me. I couldn't deal. I had to distract myself. So every second of every day was a podcast or reading or watching something, eating, self-soothing.
Mhm.
And now I feel much more like, okay, now I can be still. Now I can be silent. Now I'm okay. Um, Writing always helps. There's so much as humans, there's just so much in there. And if we just take the time to like explore it and see what's there. Um, and then you might laugh at this, but Peloton.
Awesome.
So I found this great gym when I had moved to a different place in New Jersey after my breakup, and I loved that gym. It was awesome. And so then that was just like every day during the week, I'd get up at 5 a.m. I'd go work out with them. Amazing. But coming here, I didn't find that. So I got a Peloton, and I don't know, like, it makes me feel so good. And
That's
so,
great.
yeah, so working out and movement, I think, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, yeah. Though there's a community aspect. I don't have a Peloton, but my understanding is there's a community aspect to that as well, or can be if you take
Yeah,
classes.
I think there is, and I also am conscious of the fact that it's it can be perceived as like you're really connected to these people, but you're not at all, really. Like,
Gotcha.
maybe in your like soul and your heart you are, but they don't know who you are, kind of thing. But it's still kind of cool.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that you just said that I loved and I really want to pull out was just about allowing yourself the space for distraction while you needed it. And it sounded like bringing real consciousness to when it was like, okay, I've distracted myself through the part where I can't process, right? Where the emotions, what it sounded like to me was where the emotions were too big.
Hmm.
And then once you got some space, then it was like, okay, less numbing, more engagement. Was that sort of what I heard?
Yeah, it's kind of a, when you're dysregulated, is that the right word?
Mhm.
Dysregulated?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just you kind of like holding on for your life, right? Like,
Hmm.
you're just holding on, and you got to do what you can to hold on.
Yeah.
Um, and then that does eventually ease up,
Mhm.
and you can, yeah, you don't need, I don't, well, I should speak for myself. I don't need that as much. I can sit in silence. I
Yeah.
sleep a little bit better now.
Mm.
Um, I can I can be I can be with somebody and pay attention to them
Yeah.
instead of paying attention to my own pain,
Hmm. Well
which
said.
feels so good to finally be back to that, because I really enjoy that part of me, that I can be with somebody and be like, let's talk about you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's lovely and lovely self-honoring as well.
Thanks.
Oh, well, so it's coming on time to wrap up our conversation, and I like to invite everybody to share a little bit about a nonprofit that's particularly important or dear to you. Yeah.
Yeah, so the Trevor Project is my organization. I do volunteer work with them. Kids, LGBTQ kids they're really suffering these days. Yeah. And if you think that the words that are being spoken by politicians and religious leaders or community leaders don't, if you think the kids aren't listening, they are.
Mhm.
And Trevor does a really, really good job at providing support for those kids. I mean, there's a lot of different things that Trevor does. They have counseling, both text, chat, phone counseling. They also have like what's called Trevor Space, which is a community kids, a monitored safe community that kids can go into, and kind of like ask the big questions, like, what do I do when I like this girl? And,
Mhm.
or, I grew up ultra Christian, and now they're telling me I can't be part of the church
Mm.
because I'm queer.
Yeah.
So I
Mm.
love that organization.
I do too. I do too. And I want to really thank you for being involved in it and to really acknowledge you for that. There have been two times in my life, once 30 years ago and once much more recently, when I've washed out of volunteer work because I just didn't have the resources, the internal resources to stick with it. And Trevor was one of them. I
Yeah.
trained to be on the hotline, and I just didn't have the resources. So I'm so grateful that you do, and I'm so grateful that the kids have you and so many other really dedicated, well-resourced, wholehearted volunteers. So thank you.
Well, thank you for that. And by the way, it's totally okay because we can't all do it all the time. And there was a period that
Yeah,
I was just like, I got to stop for a few months. I can't do this right now.
yeah,
But
yeah.
somebody else is there to step in, so it's okay.
You alluded to this at the beginning of our conversations. It's a nice little circle back around, but noticing where we had the capability when world change is important to us as it is to me and it is to you. Noticing where our skills and our sort of unique intersections of nature and nurture and identity equip us to be helpful, knowing that because we are intertwined inextricably, that it radiates out. So thank you for that. I had to do a lot of processing when I left Trevor and felt admittedly pretty judgmental of myself for a little while and came through it. And it does just enhance my gratitude and appreciation for people who can work in those spaces.
Mm.
Yeah. Oh, Kirsten, thank you so much for this conversation and for being willing to come and share. And from right up in the thick of a really dynamic time in your life, I'm so eager to continue to follow your journey.
Oh, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Right back at you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And to you and to whoever might be watching this, I wish you all and myself ease and joy in the midst of whatever we are learning.